Yes. Yes. Hi, everybody. How's it going? I'm live. This is my party. Welcome. My course is finished. Yay! So I don't know if you guys have got a drink handy wherever you are. It might be a little too early for drinking. This is just grapefruit soda, but anyways, cheers. Yay! So my course is finished. 14 months of work. Thank you, everybody, for joining me from Facebook, YouTube, the Twitterverse, Google+. It's great to have you all here to celebrate the end of my course. And just want to say hi to a few people who have signed on. Thanks. Thanks for letting me know that you can hear me. That's great. Okay. Hi, everybody. Hi, Nils. Hi, Vili. Hi, JJ. Hi, Gregory. Kyle, Graham. Wow, I shouldn't go through the whole list. It's just wasting everybody's time. But hello, everybody. I can see you. I can see your feed. And just to let you know, get ready to ask some questions soon. Maybe delay a little bit so that I don't have to scroll back in the feed. But I'll let you guys know when I'm ready to take a few questions. So hold off on that for a while, but keep sending me your hellos. It's really good to read them as I go. So anyway, yeah, so once again, welcome to my course. Now, this is not an advertisement because most of you guys already know about the course. I'm not trying to promote it or anything like that. But in case you have not heard of it and you just have sort of stumbled onto this event, or you kind of halfway heard about it and you don't know, just very quickly, my 101, my Orchestration 101 strings course is on Macro Video, and it's an audio-visual course that takes you through everything that the string section can do and everything that the individual instruments can do, and it ends with a course on on score reading, and with a PDF and some links and some samples and so on. So, anyways, so now that that's out of the way. This party is about sharing the moment before it all gets buried, which is something that, you know, I mean, I'm finding happens a lot. I'll do some enormous project, and before I even have time to enjoy it and feel good about it, and, you know, I have to go on to the next thing, or I might already be into the next thing by then, just completely piled in with, you know, one project after another. So, yeah, and I also really wanted to thank everybody who kept me motivated, because I really think that without that kind of support, I don't think I would have finished it if people had not kept saying, "Oh, please, Thomas, you know, could you, you know, when is it coming out, or you know, or you know, hope things are going good on it." And that really meant a lot. So thank you, thank you, thank you. It really meant something. And you know, sometimes they were just offhand comments. I don't know if the person is ever going to find out about this, about the completion of the course or not, but you know, if so, thank you, everybody out there. So one little observation that I wanted to share with you, and this is something that comes, you know, it's something that I have kind of known before, but not really put into words, just kind of, but it's something that I'm noticing as I take on more and more enormous projects. Is that your mind will fill up with a project, and it'll fill up, and it'll fill up, and this is probably the most complicated project I've ever done, with just, you know, thousands of different little details that all had to go in place. I think it would, you know, probably would be equal to the complexity of say, like a 1-hour orchestral score for me, you know, that was fully orchestrated all the way through. The thing about it is that it just fills your mind, and even when you work on other things in the meantime, that thing is still sitting in your brain, and when it's finished, it empties the mind. You know what I'm saying? It's just like your buffer is totally free, and that sensation is really liberating, because that means that I can fill it with more junk. Now, it means that I can, it means that I have space to look outside of the project now. I'm not stuck on the inside. And that was really an incredible revelation. And it didn't really sink into me till, like, I think about a day after the course was released. And there were a few little technical issues and so on. and I was being asked, could you look through it and tell us what's going on? And some people also gave us some feedback too. It was really important. Thanks for anybody out there who commented. Say, I think one of the videos like stopped halfway through. Those are just things that happen sometimes when they're coding it for upload to the site. Sometimes the software will not understand something and then just drop some data. So anyways, we worked out all those bugs in case anybody has not been back there since. So if you got the course and you haven't looked at it since the first couple of days, go back and take a look because all those issues are fixed. But anyways, so here I was, I'd finished the course, and suddenly I was being asked to look at it and figure out if there was anything wrong with it or what were the details and so on. And I found that I was standing outside it now. It was done. It was it was all finished. Some people say, oh, a great work is never completed. It's just abandoned. I'm too much of a craftsman to accept that. It's like, I put my craft into it. I know how it's going to end up. Maybe I'm a control freak about it. Maybe I'm less spontaneous as some other people might think. But the point is that when something is done, I feel that it's done. But I'll address that a little bit more later. Okay. All right. So just to go over this event before I start blabbing too much, to tell you how it's structured, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the course, tell you some funny stories and so on and so forth. I'll do a little Q&A. Then I'm going to show you some videos of the players. These will be videos of them sort of in, kind of trying to play certain things, working them out, rehearsing them, discussing them a little bit, and you can get a little bit more of a sense of the personality of these really great, fantastic musicians. Okay, but first I am going to do one little bit of Q&A, and that was that I got this terrific question yesterday from Connor Helms, which is almost like the theme of my whole talk today, which is, what was your biggest goal with a new series? What is it exactly you felt you could contribute to the orchestral pedagogy, orchestrational pedagogy, that others have not or haven't done so adequately? Is there simply an issue of outdatedness? Okay, so yes, it's not really outdatedness, because people are updating their orchestration manuals all the time. Even the Piston has been updated because it's still just great writing. People go in there and they fix little bits and pieces to make it more relevant so that you can still read this great piece of writing on the orchestra. Okay. But it's not outdatedness so much as it is that I feel that my perspective as a working orchestrator is something that needs to be shared. Okay, just not to up myself too much. But I read lots of different things. I feel, as a writer, that some points could be made a little bit more elegantly, a little bit more precisely, a little bit more comprehensively. And sometimes the emphasis is in the wrong place. For instance, famous case, which is one of the reasons why this question gets asked so many times on the Facebook group page, is, what should we score our horns, in pairs of 1 and 2, 3 and 4, or 1 and 3, 2 and 4? If you look at the second edition of the Adler, he just sort of offhandedly mentions, oh, well, some people do, it's scored either way, and now on to the next thing. There's like no context, there's no reasons why one is one way, why is another. So there's things like that. My personal experience with the orchestra is that of somebody who has been both on the outside and on the inside. I have great friendships and relationships with people who are in the orchestra, who are working orchestrators, who are in production, and all these other kinds of things. And I feel that makes my perspective what it is. Something that might be something that could help somebody else's view who already knows a lot about orchestration or something about orchestration, who doesn't know anything about orchestration. Wanting it to be a good step up. And speaking of training, it is an audio-visual world now. And this was apparent from the very first Adler edition, where it was released with recordings. There was a whole stack of recordings that or CDs that came with it, and then the Canon orchestration manual was updated so that it would have recordings as well, and now it's sort of a recordings war. And then there are other versions now, like the Rimsky-Korsakov. Garritan has got like sampled recordings of his excerpts and so on. Anyhow, so obviously people want to hear what an orchestration sounds like. And in fact, like most information nowadays is accessed via computers and the internet. I mean, just, now you're seeing Yale post their lectures. Obviously, you're not getting the whole course, but, their access to this type of information is becoming universal and really easy to get. So, and also the professional training of an orchestrator is relevant to that world too, because it's moving more and more into production, rather than just sort of sitting at home alone and scribbling on some paper. You're involved with multimedia, you're involved with other artists. You should be involved with the orchestral musicians and hearing their perspectives and hearing their feedback. It just makes you a better orchestrator. So that is all stuck into this course. So that's the shortest way I could answer Connor's question. Anyways, so that with that, I will talk just for about maybe 10 minutes about the course, and then I'll do a little bit of Q&A. If you haven't checked out my website blog, which is called Forging My First Mac Pro Video Orchestration Course, Overconfidence, Dissolution, and Redemption. That is sort of a rundown of the sort of emotional state and the logistics of putting the course together and so on and so forth. But the point that I think is worth mentioning here at this party, cheers. The point that's worth mentioning is that what I became aware of over the past 14 months is that this is a life's work. Okay, it is something that I sort of stumbled into. I thought it was going to be quick. I thought it was going to be easy. I would be able to get things done in a couple of months, 2-3 months is what I was telling Mac Pro Video. That was what I was telling myself. And I realize now that it's something much more serious than that. And the more I got into it, the more serious it got. So, but also, as I was talking about before, it's just an assemblage of thousands of different bits. And there's an attempt to make it really go smoothly so that people can absorb it quickly and easily and feel like, what I really want the student to feel like is like, well, this is easy. Why do people break their minds over this? What's so hard about orchestration? I almost want to feel, I don't want them to feel like they're cheated, obviously, but I want them to feel like it was easier than they thought it was going to be, even though it's going to be much, much harder than they realize the more they actually get into it in terms of practice. But just making the connections very quickly within somebody's mind is something that was really important. Okay, so one of the challenges that I had with this was getting good screenshots from Shutterstock. Now I'm going to show you one. I think this one is really, really funny. Okay, hang on. By the way, I'm using this application called Wirecast, and this is my first time I've ever used it live. So if I get things a little wrong, then please forgive me. Okay, but check out this shot. Okay, so this is a shot of a supermodel playing a violin. Okay, now, sadly, this was kind of half of what was available on Shutterstock at the time that I was mining through its vast volumes in attempts to get good photos for my course. And by the way, just a shout out to Steve and JF if they're watching. Thanks very much for suggesting that, getting that moving, and also thanks to Mac Pro Video for buying the license so that I could get these images. Well, not this one, which I sort of just did a little copy of off the internet, but the other quite useful images that I use throughout the course. Okay, so everything that is wrong with this video, and I want to say that this is a tame one. There were other videos of hunky guys and sexy girls and stuff like that, and it was just really kind of disgusting to me, anyways. You know, I'm not a prude or anything, but I just felt that it was just sort of like really putting the wrong message across about what was beautiful about music, what was precious. So, anyways, so what is wrong with this photo? You know, besides the fact that her eyes are closed, is I think the funniest thing is that she's bowing behind the bridge. You know, she was just gonna, she would, you know, I guess, you know, if this was a performer who was like really hip to modern techniques, you know, extended techniques, you know, maybe it doesn't matter how she holds her bow. You know, she's sort of kind of holding it in the wrong place, and you know, and her fingering sort of like not even being existent right there. So yeah, but at least you know, it's resting on her shoulder the right way, and you know, the bow at least is going straight. So anyway, yeah. So somebody just said, my friend Yvette said, "Yep, she's a musician. Clearly needs to eat." Yes, and I want you to know, at any party that you might go to, you know, that where the orchestra has played and there's a reception and everything like that, if you want to meet an orchestral musician, go to the buffet table. Okay, that's where they're all hanging out. You know, forget about, you know, schmoozing with the important folks, the mayor, the city council members, the head of the orchestra. You know, very few musicians will be hanging out there. Most of them will be, you know, trying to get, you know, trying to replenish the enormous deficit that has been worked up by the concert. So anyways, without going into that too much, so see, my feeling about it as an orchestrator, that this guy's head is a lot sexier than that than that photo. You know, I feel that you know, I just feel like I'm there. You know, this was from a real rehearsal or a real performance. These are real musicians, and they are digging in. You know, this guy's even got his sheets on a ring binder. You know, it's stuff that he's playing so much. So yeah. So that was the kind of image that we ended up using from Shutterstock, but there weren't that many. Another problem that I had was getting good shots of the orchestra playing, and it was just maddening. This was an example of what they had available, which, if you look at it and you know anything about the way that the orchestra is seated, very rarely would you see this many violins seated to the left of the cellist. You might see two violinists, or you might see a couple of violists, and then, or a couple rows of, or a couple, I say, a desk of violists and a desk of second violins. But usually you wouldn't see like, you know, a triple row of violinists to the left of the cellist. This is obviously a posed shot. So anyway, so the problem was that they did have shots of orchestras playing, but you know, the photographer had not gotten permission from each and every single member of the orchestra to post their image as a, you know, as a license-free image. So that was the thing that we ran into. It's just, you know, that's why there are no images of orchestras in there. I just did not have, you know, time to do that myself, to go to orchestra rehearsals, take a photo of everybody and say, hey, can I put this in my course? You know, what kind of a question I would get for that? Your course? What is your course? You know, is it that the one with the sexy images of the girls playing the violin who don't know how to play in it? You know, so I didn't want questions like that. So anyhow, so that was one of the problems that I had. But I did get some really great photographs of the players themselves, and they were just terrific at it. You know, they knew exactly what I wanted. Here, Peter Barber is demonstrating pizzicato, and I had this image that way because I wanted people to see how the bow was being held. It's a little different from the other direction. I don't know if I ended up using this one, but it was still a pretty good image, and I took a bunch of shots from this angle, sort of a reverse from the regular course. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about some concerns that I still have about the course. Okay, and I am actually amazed that these have not come up as much as they have. First of all, just to talk about it, I was videoing this with a tiny little $90 digital camera, just using the video function, and that was so naive of me. Yeah, it was just I should have really worked with a professional videographer from the beginning, but which I ended up doing, which I'll discuss later. But anyhow, um, so yeah, so the problem was that actually, though I got pretty good audio, as you might have heard from the course, you know, it's really decent, and especially that hall that we recorded in was terrific. But I was running into problems with the just with the resolution of the camera, especially in darker, more dramatic lighting. In fact, the farther away from the subject I moved the camera, the more fuzzier it got, which any photographer out there is probably saying, yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course. But, you know, here's an example of some of the challenges that we were kind of up against. Um, So as you can see from that image, it's really noisy in the background. Terrific images of David Chickering playing the cello, and you know he's an old friend of ours, and it was great to include him in this course. And I really love the informal way that he looks there. Just you know, he looks like he's on his way back from the beach, which he might have actually been. It was a very warm day. So, anyways, but all the same, it just you know you can see that there was sort of fuzz in the back, and it was a bit of a concern for me and for Mac Pro Video. And the other thing that we were having a problem with was something I did not think about was that the bowing in the score samples, which is the original bowing of the composers, does not always match the bowing of the performers, which is a more practical approach. You know, the composer imagines one thing, and even if they are an experienced string player, the practical experience of the orchestra player is going to always trump them, and they're going to, you know, unless the conductor steps in and says, no, I want you to do it exactly how the score says, usually the concertmaster or the section leader will decide how the thing should be played or how it should be bowed, and that does not always agree with the score sample. And of course, these musicians are all assistant principals. In the case of Sophia, principals. So you know they decide. They're used to making those decisions. The decisions of bowing that you see in there are authoritative. They you know they are practical solutions to the composer's wishes. Okay, so I'm going to take a break from this discussing the course. There were a couple other things, but I don't want to go on and on about it. But just to mention one thing is that my hard disk crashed when I was about to run like the first half of the course for some very close friends, and I had it all set up, and I was going down to the South Island the next day to give a lecture, and that very night my hard disk crashed on my computer, and wow, that was a killer. And fortunately, it didn't erase the data, but I had to sort of reassemble some things, and thank goodness that I saved most of the original data. So anyhow, all right, so I'm going to answer some Q&A, and I actually have this funny screen. Hang on a second. I'm going to put this on while I'm getting some things together. Okay, I'm back. All right, so our first question, you can start asking questions now. So I'll be watching my feed over here on the screen, so I'm not becoming disinterested with you personally if I'm looking over here. Okay, so all right. So first question, which was asked yesterday on the Facebook group, is from Theo Howe, and is what are some good indicators as to when you should use a divisi versus a double, triple, quadruple stop in the context of an orchestra? That's a very, very good question, okay? And it has to do with the composition of your work and with the approach of the music, okay? So I think mainly what you're asking is when it should be used harmonically. So if there is a harmonic section and everybody, you want a nice full sound and so on and so forth, when should you use divisi? When should you use a double stop? I would say that divisi is really the best way to go. Somebody mentioned yesterday in a related post that with divisi you get full vibrato on both notes. Actually, a good player should be able to vibrato both notes if both notes are fingered. That's not a big problem. But the intonation tends to just be better in the long run, and it's just really comfortable and easy for the players to play. I mean, this is one of those tips that I would have put on my tip of the day, which is that players in the desks are actually the way that the desks are set up. The player on one side plays the top part of a divisi, and the player on the other side plays the bottom part of a divisi, and that way you have this wonderful harmony stretched out across the section. Okay, so yeah, I would say divisi is a good default position to take. In fact, some musicians, some composers' scores basically don't even bother mentioning divisi. They just assume that people are going to play it, so it isn't even marked whether it should be divisi or non-divisi. And the players also treat it as a default. If you forget to write divisi in your part or in your score, they're just going to play divisi when they see an interval. Of course, whenever you have a kind of a complex two-voice type thing, unless you really have a specific kind of bluegrass or folk music type approach that you want the section to do, you should have it done as divisi. And double and triple stops tend to matter more when the music is really, really loud, because the louder you get, and the harder it is for the strings to compete with the sound of the rest of the orchestra joining in. So that has something to do with it too. But another good indicator is, are there some easy positions that you can use, sixths, thirds, those kinds of things. Is it will there be an open string that could be used? Is it like a chord and a cadence where you're just really ripping one big huge triple or quadruple stop? Is it a arpeggiando where you're kind of going back and forth across a few strings? Those are some things that you should look for. Okay, harmonics notation in the string section. I like this question because because I actually have a little still prepared for it. Clelson Lopez asked, I'd like to ask about harmonics notation in string sections. What is the best way to write? Just a circle above the harmonics to sound, or using a diamond, and so forth? I'm asking this because sometimes the fingering is hard for the player depending on the previous and next note's context. Well, of course, that is something you're going to have to pay attention to. If you have this really high fingered passage and all of a sudden they have to play an artificial harmonic, which would be the next note up, in order to get it, they might have to cross over to the fourth string and just suddenly be in this position, right? So yes, you should be thinking about that, and you have to make the decision. I can't say, oh, this is the context for that. Every score is different. But here's a really cool score about how these things are notated, a cool still about how these things are notated. Let me just get this up here. Yeah, so so with this one, you can see there's the first one is just your common or garden harmonics notation. You could have that for an artificial or natural harmonic. Then the second one is the touch 4, and a couple different ways of expressing that. And then on the last two examples are common errors, like people already know that it's a harmonic, so you don't need to put a dot above it. And people, it just confuses things if you put a stem all the way up to the little mini note. So yeah, so what you're asking is, what is the best way to write it? I would say it is probably better to use a touch 4 harmonic if you're going to do a artificial harmonic passage that has a specific, that where you really are thinking about showing the player what they have to do next. If it's a long passage where everything is going to be all harmonics and stuff like that, sometimes it's better to let them work it out themselves, because they might try a solution that is something that you didn't really anticipate. But I would say, if you know that it's going to be artificial harmonics, it's going to be in the middle of a passage where other things are going on, you should write out the touch 4 symbol, or the touch 4 notation. Okay, so I'm going to go back to YouTube here and see. Okay, there's some general ones. How might a composer go about developing his ear? Professional composers seem to be able to compose without using instruments to check their ideas. Yes, I am one of those. And this is related to one that I noticed down here. When you compose, do you sketch or write directly to an orchestral score? I do it all in my head. I just, but at this point, I've scored like 20 or 30 hours of music. So, it's more than that. It's more like 40 hours of music if you count like chamber music, piano scores, arrangements for other things. But orchestral music, I've scored over, somewhere between 20 and 30 hours of music. Definitely over 20 hours of it have been performed. So with that much of a feedback loop in what I see and what I hear and what I think and so on and so forth, it just is automatic. I just, I think of an orchestral idea. I imagine how all the instruments would be making a color and so on and so forth. And that all kind of ties into how might a composer go about developing his ear. I'll give you a little thing to work on right now, okay? And that is, I want you to memorize a piece in your mind, okay? Your favorite piece of music. Make sure it's something that's like 4 or 5 minutes long, like a movement of a Beethoven symphony or some other kind of work. Don't make it something really thorny and complicated. But I want you to memorize it in your mind. Just remember the way that it sounds all the way through and run it. And especially, actually, this really developed my ears. I thank the Bee Gees for doing this, because I cannot stand the Bee Gees. Apologies to anybody who's a fan of the Bee Gees. But, I was 16 years old in 1978, and I was inundated with just, boom boxes and loudspeakers and squawk boxes, and everybody was playing this music that I just could not stand it. And like if I hear it now, if I'm in a store and I hear it, I'll just leave the store. I just, how to get Thomas to leave a room, put on the Bee Gees. Anyways, so what I would do when one of their annoying ditties got stuck in my head was I would just run a movement of Beethoven. I would actually, and sometimes I would run the entire Sixth Symphony, which I know by heart. And just knowing how I wanted the instruments to react, after a while I could get to the point where I could slow them down, speed them up, have them add a part, have them transition to another part, add a development, make up things of my own, and just all using the orchestra in my own head. That is the way to develop your ear, I would say. Just, learn to imagine, learn to remember large stretches of music in the full coloration. Demand that from your inner ear. That is really the way that I developed the most. Of course I did sight singing, and I did huge amounts of score reading. So, that all develops you too. Okay, some other questions. Going back here. Why Vaughan Williams in Thomas Tallis? Okay, I don't understand that question. I'm a total noob in terms of orchestration. This is from Rebecca Frank. I really want to work on it during the summer. How would you go about converting a piano, French horn, double bass trio into an orchestra piece? Well, first of all, I would ask myself, is this going to be a piece for orchestra and horn soloist? Right? So are you taking the piano part and the double bass part and expanding that into an orchestral score with French horn obbligato? Or are you just taking, if this is a work, which I suspect which is a little bit more integrated, then I think you would want to ask yourself, how much of this is applicable to just making all the different colors, all the different instruments of the orchestra take over bits and pieces from the French horn and the piano and so on. The other thing that you have to ask yourself is how much of this score needs to be filled in. Do there need to be wider stretching harmonies? Do there need to be more pointed episodes? I'm not saying to change any of the structure of the piece, but do some of the gestures in the music need to be accentuated? Need to be emphasized? Do you need to harmonize them? Do you need to add a contrapuntal line and so on and so forth to bring meaning out? And if you look at how much Ravel changed the musical context of his works when taking it from a piano and putting it to an orchestra, then I think that can serve as a model sometimes for people who want to find more in a score than in the original. Let's see, just one more question, then I'm going to go back. Okay, all right, so not a lot. Yeah. Okay, a couple more questions here, then I'm going to talk a little bit about the players. Theo Howe asks another question. A fair amount of string parts / music I've encountered changes clefs when the notes would appear in an illegible format in the first clef. I think that means like maybe too many ledger lines. Is this done solely for legibility, or is there a perception phenomenon to it as well? Also, when can it be deemed musically appropriate to change clefs aside from range issues? Well, actually, I would say that the main reason to change clefs should be range issues. Okay, so it's not just readability. As I talk about in my course, the clefs that are used in a cello writing actually do cover certain ranges of the cello. So, for instance, the bass clef covers the sort of bass and baritone range of the cello, and the tenor clef covers the tenor range. In fact, the lowest line of the tenor staff is the open D of the cello, where its tenor range starts. So, anything that you write in that staff and maybe a few ledger lines above is, that is the tenor register of the cello, and it has its own logic to it. And then, of course, the very, very high notes are written in treble clef, and that's the soprano register of the cello. So yes, those things should be a part of it. I think there was a related question down here, or somebody asked it like, when do you write ottava and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's the next question. Something about sight reading. I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so. I say musically appropriate. It is about readability, and it is about getting the musician to understand that it's an area of their instrument that you want to be approached in a certain way. So if it's just if you're just putting in a treble clef on a viola part just to cover a few high notes that might be hard to read, that's one thing. But if you're in terms of passages, that's another approach entirely. So I would say, avoid clef changes, unless it really is a registral thing or a really, really difficult to sight read type of thing. Violas don't have a problem reading up to like the fourth ledger line, but when you get above that, or when the entire passage is way up in that area, change to a treble clef. So I would say approach it in that way. And then there's one last question really quick from Dave Nedweck. It's, I'd appreciate advice about what makes a part easiest to sight read. Key signatures versus accidentals, too many, too few articulation markings, ottava versus ledger lines, which I sort of addressed before. Whatever would make folks happiest in the studio. See, that's a very telling thing. So obviously this is a question more targeted about how can you score something so for a studio session that will be the most readable. I would say if it's like film music, cues that you're recording, probably avoiding key signatures. They're pretty much just left out of parts. However, if it's very tonal music and there's a specific key relationship and stuff, leave the key signature in. But most of film scoring right now is it's not what I would call atonal. It is very tonal, but its tonal center shifts so much that first the guy is starting in D flat, and then he's in D, and then he's in E flat major, and so on. So there's kind of no point to really writing in all those key signatures and all those changes because they become difficult to read. That's the thing that I would get glared at the most from, is inserting a key change, and then then the musician would like not notice it, and then they get mad at me about it. And it's like, well, I'd say, well, the viola should be playing B flat there. It's like, what? Well, there was a key change to E flat major, and if it's just a question of like 8 bars of F sharp minor, it's better just to leave out the key signature change and just to have them play in F sharp minor and go back, and not to be constantly changing keys over and over again, or just leave out the key signature. Too many or too few articulation markings. If it's a passage where there are articulation markings used over and over again, just mark the first bar. So, if it's all going to be, say, tenuto staccato, then mark the first bar like that, and then just say sim afterwards, or just leave it blank. People will realize what you're talking about. Okay, so now let me get, there was some great footage that I want to share with you guys, and this is of the players, and I want to talk about them too because their contribution to the course was just so fundamental. And I think it's stuff that you really enjoy watching. So first of all, to discuss the violinist who contributed, Donald Armstrong, he had the greatest approach. I mean, he actually was the first person I recorded, and he helped to set the tone, almost just like the concertmaster that he is. He's the associate concertmaster for NZSO, which means that he's got a lot of responsibility there, and I think he realized the way the course was going, and he sort of wanted to make sure that his contribution to it was serious. And we had never done this before. He was the first person on, so he actually showed me. He kind of helped to lead me into the right direction about the energy and everything else. But just a really great guy, really solid personality musically, and I'd like to show you just a little bit of him rehearsing through a part. We're sort of recording and rehearsing at the same time, and just to show the care that he puts into this little Beethoven excerpt. Now, keep in mind as you're watching it that this is something that, of course, the whole section would play. It's just a matter of course. But look at the way that Donald sets up his fingers so that he's absolutely sure that his intonation is going to be true, and he's like, even though he does a passable cut, he's just not satisfied with that, and he does it again. So here's Donald Armstrong. Hey, wait a second.
Yes, just had changing idioms so quickly. I'll just practice it once if you don't mind. Okay.
We're still rolling.
All right. One more.
Yeah, so that was Donald Armstrong playing a little bit of the Beethoven Sixth. Speaking of Beethoven Sixth, and yeah, I really appreciated that level of care, just just the level of focus. People were just really bringing their best game to this. Another person who did this was Peter Barber, the violist, who is the associate principal viola for the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra. And what I really liked about Peter is that he's got this huge amount of experience doing recording and also playing contemporary music. And he was our Iron Man. From the very beginning, he would just play a take of it, and then he would wait for the sound to die down in the hall, and then he would just play another take. He played 3 in a row, as many as I liked, and very, very good sense of humor about fixing errors. I mean, nobody had any problem with adjusting how they were playing to suit what we needed for the course. But Peter, in particular, was really mature and just really patient about it. So here's a little bit of Peter Barber in action on viola. You want to practice it a little?
No, that's fine. Okay. That's what I'm doing.
Okay.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, typically I wouldn't do this in Sol D, just because with my fingers, I know I just can't get the semitones accurately.
Right.
Like
You could cheat at the end. Why don't you cheat?
I'll do the first stanza, the first line in Sol D.
Right.
But I might finish as you say.
Sure. All right, so that's the incomparable Peter Barber plowing through one of my excerpts. So now we've already looked a little bit at David Chickering, and I want to play just a little bit more. This is him playing some of his warm-up, and David is just such a great guy. I mean, he's just, he's such a solid player and so imaginative, and he's a guy who could easily have been had a career as a solo cellist. So here's a little bit of him playing some Bach. Hang on. Oops, Beethoven, I meant to say. Sorry, I do know the difference. Now, another player I'd like to mention is Joan Perarnau, who was our double bassist. And finding the right double bassist was a bit of a chore. There were a couple other people who contributed, but didn't feel that their contribution had quite clicked, and there were some other things. There were some more parts that I needed, and so on and so forth. And to tell you the truth, even though what my first 2 double basses had played was really good, it's just the camera quality was getting to be too bad. From the farther I moved the camera from the subject, the more difficult it was to get the video to work right. So I kind of really had to redo all of the bass stuff anyways. And Joan did a terrific job. He's a real artist. You know, there isn't that much call for solo double bassists, but boy, he could really do it. I'm going to show you a couple of clips. Um, one is of him playing a famous Pablo Casals solo, and another one is just a little bit of Bach. But he just really has just got a great sound. He just really makes you understand that double bass is really a different instrument from cello. It can imitate it or it can approach it in some ways, but it really is its own sound. Okay. I hope I'm back. Thanks so much. It was weird. I went to Joan's second recording and it just crashed. So I guess the gods of YouTube do not want us to watch that particular thing today. So look, we're getting towards the top of the hour, but I've got a lot more to say, and you guys want to just stick around? Because yeah, I could easily go for maybe another 20 minutes or so. There's some more questions I would like to answer. I know you guys have got more questions, and I'd like to show you just a little bit more footage. In fact, let me show you a little bit of that now. I'm not going to try Joan's second thing. I don't want things to crash again. But I am going to try a little bit of our pickup. I'm sorry. I was about to say pickup artist. Excuse me, that's not what I meant to say. The artist who helped us with our pickups, okay, was Sophia Atchison, just a terrific viola player, and kind of a little story about this session that we did, which was she flew into Wellington. She was trying out for a job with Orchestra Wellington, which is the sort of the regional orchestra. That's the one that I actually am involved with in terms of being an education composer in residence. And so she was trying out for a job just to make it into the viola section. They had, I think, 3 positions open, including principal player. So anyhow, she didn't know she wanted to be principal. She just wanted to just get into the section and so on, and be a regular player in an orchestra. And she'd actually done some playing in Auckland Philharmonic or Auckland Philharmonia, and had trialed for NZSO. Anyway, she's a really good player. And so she came down. She was hanging out with us, and then she did this recording with us, to help me do the pickups, because there were moments when my camera had gotten fuzzy or the audio hadn't worked out or something like that. And then the next day she went and did her audition, and she got the job as principal violist, which was great, which she wasn't expecting, but I was anticipating that she would get, because she's really, really a good viola player, really solid. The other violist, Peter Barber, had seen one of the samples that was up on YouTube, and he's saying he was really good, that Sophia that she is also there. I think it is, because it gives sort of a perspective of 2 different approaches to viola playing. What's interesting about Sophia is something that I've talked about before. She's got she is a taller woman, and she has longer fingers, and that's exactly the right type of frame that you need in order to play viola, because if your fingers are too small, it just really, you just feel like you're carrying this enormous weight on your shoulder. You do need to have, to be a slightly taller person, have longer fingers, have a little bit more stamina. And Sophia is just also really, really imaginative player, really, and of course she was psyched for that weekend too. It probably helped. So she was really in her top form in that moment. And she also played viola da gamba, which is she's a student of, and is already playing some bits which are really terrific. Well, I wasn't able to put very much viola da gamba into this course, so I'm going to play you a few minutes of it now, and enjoy yourselves. This is some people have sort of snuck off for a bit of tea or and stuff. So here, this is something to watch as you sip your tea, and hopefully this won't crash. Okay, viola da gamba demo take 2. Hi folks, I'm back. So that was Sophia Atchison playing viola da gamba, which was just was great that she could bring down from Auckland. And yeah, and it really, I was only able to put a few seconds of it into the course, but I wanted people to understand the difference between the brighter instruments of the violin family and the darker, sort of deeper, resonant instruments of the viol family. So, anyways, it was a really terrific example, and I think we used a little bit of the audio in a couple other areas. Okay, so now back to the Q&A. There was a question from Theo Howe yesterday. What is /are the most glaring orchestrational errors for strings you've seen coming from beginning composers, and what's your advice to avoid it/them? Okay, so I'm going to talk about two errors now, okay? One is just using tons and tons and tons and tons of double stops and divisi but mainly double stops, assuming that players can play um, successions of double stops where the fingers are changing position really rapidly, as easily as say like a shredder guitarist is changing chords very, very quickly. Well, the thing is that string players do not have frets, so there's a certain amount of psychology and ergonomics that go into shaping a double stop, and you can't just rattle off a huge string of them unless you are Niccolo Paganini, and that is not that is not orchestral playing. Yes, you will actually see some solos, some solo sonatas and duo sonatas, like violin and piano, or violin concertos, where the solo part is extremely fluent in double stops. But that's solo playing. And actually, even if you could train a whole section or a whole orchestra of Paganini's to play, it actually would not sound that great, because that is not, there is a certain unification that comes from a more stable approach to string writing, and you take some of that away when you have endless successions of double stops all over the place. You just have people frantically trying to reposition their fingers all the time, and that's not really what I would call idiomatic string writing. I mean, and even if it wasn't idiomatic, but it was a new technique that people should learn, it would still have a chance. The most reasonable chance is that it would probably end up sounding awful, because the string players would not have the ability to get it together in time for you. So that is like the number one error. In fact, I've engaged with players and said, listen, there's way too many double stops and triple stops, and basically you're treating the cellos like they're a piano, like the left hand of a piano and stuff like that. And sometimes people will defend it. Just, no, this is the way it has to sound, and I've seen it in other scores and everything else. And all I can say is you just have to use your experience. You just have to, maybe you will be working with players who can do it. I would say avoid it. The other error it has to do with divisi, and has to do with just breaking up the orchestra into smaller and smaller bits, the string section into smaller and smaller bits all the time. So, so that there are like 4 voices in each section. And there is a really cool aspect to that. If you look at Vaughan Williams' variations on Fantasia on a theme of Thomas Tallis, but that is intentional. He is intentionally trying to get this effect where you use so many voices, so many different multiple voices of the strings, that you end up sounding like an organ. Well, the thing about that is that you get the same overtones that an organ gets. You get the same kind of phenomenon that an organ gets, and you're writing organ music. And there's also that sense that I was talking about, unity. When many players are playing one single note or one single phrase, there's just nothing like that. And when you break that down too many times, or if that is your entire approach, then you're really missing something. And so is the orchestra. That's all I'm going to say about it. Which keys are the worst to write and arrange orchestral music in? Probably like, I would say like G sharp minor. I would say that one is like nobody's favorite. A flat minor, where you have like 7 flats, or C sharp major, same thing. Just like the really intense, bottom left of the circle of fifths. That is someplace to avoid, I would say. There are some players, like say the celesta player, the xylophone player, maybe the saxophonists, if they are part of your orchestra, they're not going to have any problem going down to, say playing everything in B flat minor. But then again, then you have like say the Tchaikovsky piano concerto in B flat minor, and that works fine. It is a bear for the orchestra players, but he's Tchaikovsky. I mean, he wrote it. So I would say like that's another danger that you take by being a being a musician that doesn't have that same kind of reputation or clout, and writing something that is kind of like intentionally obnoxious or difficult to learn for the orchestra players. It's just a big risk, I would say. I mean, you could do it if that's where your vision leads you. I cannot tell you to not do that, but I would say that would be another mistake, is to write in really, really weird keys all the time. Kaizad Patel asks, what is the best speed for playing spiccato on the stringed instruments, or saltando, and so on. What tempo and note values would be best for the orchestra to be tight and in control? Okay, so this is an interesting question, and that is that saltando and spiccato, it is actually more related to dynamics. Okay, so they're actually going to necessarily be a quicker type of of playing, and it just has to do with how fast can the fingers get around in the left hand to get to the different pitches and coordinate with the bouncing of the bow. Can the bow be bounced in a way that is rhythmic, that will follow the the fingering of the left hand precisely? One of the worst things for spiccato, I would say, would be like doing a spiccato where the where the rhythmic values are constantly changing, because there's, you know, the people are trying to bounce their bow a bit, and you know, they have to sort of vary it, and it just gets to be confusing. So I would say that the tempo thing is not really the biggest issue about it. I mean, there's an upper limit on any type of any type of bowing situation, but it really has more to do with the dynamic thing. You know, if you're trying to compose idiomatically, then just, you know, listen to works that have got a lot of that in it, and like listen to what is the mood, what is the dynamic, what is the energy of the music. I would say that's more important of an issue than the tempo. The tempo is part of it, but they're saying best for the orchestra to be tight enough. They should be able to do it just as long as you've scored a part that is playable, that, you know, that has there's a certain natural feel, because that's one of those things that where you're using the natural. Yes, you can do unidiomatic things with any particular technique, but spiccato is typically, you know, it is working off of things like, you know, the laws of physics, you know, bouncing, gravity, response. Any action gets an equal and opposite reaction, and that's what happens when you bounce your bow. So you know, there is a certain practical side to scoring saltando or spiccato. Okay, bow markings. Is it safe to indicate your intent with a phrase by using one, and will it annoy and aid the players if there's one on almost every phrase? Yes. Yes, it will, because they know what to do. They know what to do. If you have a specific bowing in mind, mark it on its first instance. Then the next time it shows up, write simile, or just write SIM, period, and leave it to the players. That's all you need to do. Yes, it is safe to indicate your intent with a phrase by using one, but at the same time, be aware of the fact that the player is king, you know, or the conductor is king, really, but the players decide, and usually their decision is based on experience and practicality and all these other kinds of things. So you have to sort of, I would say, actually, you know, one thing I used to do as a young composer was I used to look at my orchestra parts, and, you know, that is revealing. You know, I'd get like little frowny faces where I had done something really obnoxious, you know, or I would actually like see little cartoons written in the sides that were really funny. And people still do that. They kind of get bored, you know. They're waiting through like about a 64 bar tacit or something. They haven't, you know, they don't have enough time to actually read a magazine during that break, but they do have enough time to just write something smart-assed on your score. So those things can teach you, you know, even though, you know, it might actually hurt your feelings, but have a good sense of humor about it. Okay, so JJ Bertum asks, how articulate is the French horn compared to the other brass? I am always hesitant to write super splashy or quick parts for it, but then I end up writing a boring line that doesn't exploit the full potential of the instrument. If you could give us a rundown of the basic virtuosic capabilities of the horn, that would be awesome. I've listened to lots of horn concertos where the soloist is playing almost as fast as a triple tonguing trumpet. Okay, well, all right, so yeah, I mean, it depends on what you want to write. You've listened to a lot of horn concertos. Are you writing a horn concerto, or are you just interested in writing orchestra parts? So if you're writing orchestra parts, there are certain things you do not want to do in, you know, that are soloistic on that level, unless it's for the first horn player and it's part of a featured passage, and they're going to have plenty of time to get ready for it, and you're aware of what you're doing, right? Yes, you know. French hornists can do pretty fast tonguing, and yeah, I mean, but it's just like, what is the nature of the part that you want to write? I mean, if you want to write a French horn that sounds a French horn part that sounds like a trumpet part, you're better off writing a trumpet part. I would recommend that you really do a huge amount of score reading of those composers who were the masters of French horn writing. I mean, like, what's a great symphonic French horn solo? You know, I would say like one of the most difficult horn solos, and the one that they always ask the French horn player to play as an audition piece is the Siegfried horn call. Yeah, you know, that from Wagner. Just listen to that. That tells you right now that is a hard part to play, but it's rewarding, and it is idiomatic to the horn. You know, it's something that really feels right. If the horn player nails it, they say, "Yes, I used my instrument to its greatest potential." Not, "I could barely play this, but I got it right," and even though my instrument isn't built for it. You see the difference there, right? That's so. That is the type of composer actually I am. I'm more interested in pushing the boundaries on what the instrument can do as a part of what it naturally could sound like, rather than pushing the boundaries of the player in a direction that could be done on any instrument, or actually is really more like another instrument. So, I mean, and that's just a matter of taste. That is, my judgment is not superior to any other composers in this regard, but that's sort of more the type of composer I am. Let's see. Another thing about it, I would say, like I was mentioning, good horn composers. You know, might not be your style. I would say Richard Strauss, and Gustav Mahler. Those guys, like if you look at their symphonic works, they basically go through everything that a horn can possibly do and a horn section can possibly do. So so yeah, so I'm just making sure here. Yeah, that everything is still live. Hang on a second. Sorry, I hope this isn't... All right. Yep. We're all still good, looks like. Okay. Great. So, so I think I'm going to wrap things up now, because I can just feel the telltale signs of my throat starting to get a little too hoarse to talk a whole lot longer. But look, I want to thank everybody for coming to this event. I've been looking at everybody's comments as I went, and it's terrific to have your feedback, to have your enthusiasm, and to know that, like, you know, to know that you're getting something out of it. That really is what counts. You know, is to know that there's that this resource isn't going to waste, and that it's useful to you. Now that is the biggest, you know, that is the biggest thing that I get out of it. So what's ahead is, of course, people have immediately been asking about, well, where's the 102 course? Come on, just pull it out of your back pocket. Just, come on, just put it, where is it? Come on, you got it. So I'm thinking, right now I've got to finish up, I'm working on a film score. It's actually a score for an anime. So that is going to be finished in the next 3 weeks. After that, I was going to work on the Sibelius 104 orchestration project, which was originally going to be a MIDI score thing, as some people might remember. And we decided to make it more about orchestration. And I really don't know which way Avid is going with their, you know, with their plans for Sibelius. I mean, if they're going to sit on it for a while longer before they come up with the next upgrade, then I will probably go ahead and make the 105 thing. But it's just, you know, there were some things built into the expectation of making so many Sibelius courses, was that the product was going to do well, and that there would be a lot of support for it, that, you know, people would be using it a lot, there would be a lot of enthusiasm behind it, and that would show in how many people were actually using the course. Well, I mean, the fact is that even though I feel I did a good job and I've gotten great reviews, that really those courses on Mac Pro Video have not really been watched all that much. You know, I mean, they haven't made back their advances. So that is one of the reasons why we have not been pushing them so much. But on the other hand, this orchestration course, you know, has, like, it's just going, it's going nuts over there. So, you know, I mean, it's doing really well, which is something I didn't know what to expect. So, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful that people are watching it and getting stuff out of it. I'm really happy about that. So at this point, you know, I want to do the orchestration project, Sibelius 104 course. And I definitely, but I see as I was saying, my life's work. I see these orchestration courses as being part of that, a really important part of that. So definitely, I am going to do what I can to finish them, and to do the 102 course, at least to be working on it at the end, the second half of this year. Then brass and percussion in 2015, and and then the 105 course, which is going to be about the visitors, who are sort of semi-permanent members, keyboards, harp, and so on. Now, the thing about this is that I'm going to just say one last thing about the course in general, and that is that one of the biggest problems that I was having last year was that my original idea of the course was just too huge. I mean, I really wanted to make it a comprehensive orchestration course where you really orchestrate it as part of the course, but I realized that just doesn't really fit Mac Pro Video, like the whole way that things are taught there. So that's why I've sort of taken the tail end of my idea for a guided course to scoring, and I've made that separate, and that is going to be hopefully released this year as part of the first sort of sister course. And that's what I'm planning with each of these video courses, that they'll have a sister course where you get a sample to score, and then some guidelines, and you look over the arranger's shoulder, and then you try your own samples and you compare them to existing ones, and so on and so forth. And I'm building up a little bit of that approach right now with these monthly orchestration challenges, but it's not really related to it, but it's just something that is similar. So anyways, it's something I really look forward to sharing with you guys, which is really, I mean, in the end, what was this 101 orchestration course all about? It really was an instrumentation course, right? Where I was telling you about the instruments, what they did, what were their roles, how did they relate to each other. And that is a fundamental part of orchestration, but it isn't really orchestration itself, right? It's one of the building blocks. It's one of the tools, one of the bits of craft. And of course you have to have a solid grounding in it. I mean, yes, it is orchestration, but it isn't the act of orchestration, right? It is the foundation of orchestration knowledge, but it's not the act of orchestration. And that's really what my love is, what my focus is, sharing, how do you score something? I still haven't quite answered that. I mean, I've shown you how things are scored in that course, but I haven't really answered how do you score them? How do you make those mistakes that you're going to need in order to improve yourself? So anyways, I hope to answer that with the ebook courses that are going to be coming up on the Orchestration Online website. And now I've got absolutely no voice left. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. It was great to see you. I hope that that I was able to keep going past the time, the cutoff date that I had set for my cutoff time of 8 o'clock, and that you're all watching this. And that is all for today. Thanks so much. You guys are great, and I'll have to do another one of these. This is really, really fun. See you guys later.